I am now the same age, 52 years old, as my dad was when he died. I've been thinking about that a lot. I miss him every day. He would have loved this congregation. My dad, Lester, was such an outgoing and friendly person. He would have been working this room. He would have given Liz Sherman a run for her money, I'm pretty sure, in the schmoozing department. I try to emulate him because I admire what he was as a husband, a father, and a friend. I admire the way he lived his life without regrets, without holding back what he thought and felt and dreamed about. I love that I know what he was about, and I love that I know what was important to him. And of course, I'm sad about all the moments in my life that he's missed, all that my kids have missed out on by not having their amazing grandfather in their lives. Most of all, I'm sad for how hard it's been for my mom, who's here today, these last 24 years. Sad for what she's lost, although she is strong and resilient and an amazing mom. For all that she and her high school sweetheart were looking forward to when my dad's life was tragically taken from him. When I think about our high holiday liturgy in light of all of this, I have to say, some of it's hard for me to take. Maybe that's true for you too. And no text is more challenging to me than the one that got you here earlier that we're going to share in a few minutes.
Rosh Hashanah yikatevun uvyom tzom Kippur yechatemun.
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed, who shall live and who shall die? When I think about the unfairness in the world, about my dad's life snuffed out in his prime, when I look out into this sacred congregation and see so many of you who've lost loved ones way too soon, I admit that I have a hard time even breathing my way through this prayer. I was meditating on these words a few weeks back, wrestling with it in my head, wrestling with what I would say to you this afternoon, trying to feel my way through them and why they leave me feeling so bugged and so angry. And each time I read the words, all I could think of was, really, God? That's what this day is about? You're keeping score? And if my deeds, my good ones, outweigh my bad ones, I'll merit to live another year? I guess then that I'm supposed to conclude that my dad's bad deeds outweighed his good ones, so that's why his life was taken from him when his first grandchild was just short of their first birthday. I don't know about you, but if that's what this text means, no small part of me wants to skip it. Or better yet, go machzor by machzor through the hundreds that we own and white out that text or rip out the page. Because while I admit that I don't always know how justice works in the universe, I know that that's not what I believe. Who shall live and who shall die? Really, God? Is that what you're thinking about on Yom Kippur while I'm thinking about you? What you want from me? How I've been my best self this past year and where I've missed the mark? You're making a list, checking it twice. And then you want me to hear these words?
Uteshuvah, utefilah, utzedakah, ma'avirin et roah hagezerah.
But repentance, prayer, and charity temper the decree. You want me to hear those words and feel better about it? You want me to believe that if I say the right words in the right order with the perfect Hebrew pronunciation, with perfect pitch, if I stay all the way through Ne'ilah, that I'll get to live until next Yom Kippur, and that how much charity I give determines my existential fate, and that if I don't do all of those things just right, I won't be here next year. If I'm being totally honest, and maybe on this point I shouldn't be as honest with you as your rabbi, I just want to say, Forget that. If that's what this text means, I'm out. Did I mention these words are hard for me? But as I thought more about the words, I wondered if perhaps I've been thinking about them all wrong. What if these words are not about God deciding which of us will be sitting here next year and which will not? What if the answer to the seemingly rhetorical question, who shall live and who shall die, is me? I shall live and I shall die. All of us will. I will live and then I will die. It is the way of things. As the words of the prayer say, people do die in different ways. Some at peace, some tormented, some at the end of a long life, and some far, far too soon. Some of natural causes, others violently at the hands of another human being or at the hands of Mother Nature. But we all, each of us, will live. And we all, each of us, will die. That's a fact. We will live and we will die. What if that's what the Mosbacher insists on confronting us with each year at this season? If so, then the second line that Cantor Kipnis just chanted, Uteshuva, utefila, utstakama, avirin, et roa hagazera, repentance, prayer, and charity temper the decree, can mean something different. Faced with the understanding that we will live and that we will die, we can choose with even more urgency and focus and awareness how we will live. We can live with repentance, prayer, and charity, or not. We can live with integrity and honesty and love, or not. We can live having pursued lives of meaning, connection, and purpose in our lives, or not. We can live showing and telling others what our values are, what matters most to us in life and in death, or not. That I can accept. Now all we're left with is the fact that we're going to live and that we're going to die. I recently read a book by Dr. Todd May called Death, the Art of Living. If you are as big a fan as me of a television show called The Good Place, and if you haven't checked it out, you should find out where it's streaming and watch it now. A show that appeared on NBC for 4 seasons a few years back. You should definitely add May's book to your reading list because he was the philosopher who consulted on the show. How many primetime shows have a philosopher? I mean, really. And the upshot of the book and of the show, spoiler alert, is that it is the fact that we know that we will die that gives ultimate meaning to our lives. I know that death is a hard topic. Even if we set aside the idea that there's some colossal scale on high somewhere that determines the nature of our lives and deaths, death is still a hard topic. It's one we don't like to talk about in our culture. It's one we whisper about if we talk about it at all. It's one of those topics we certainly don't talk about in polite company. It's easier to talk about how we live. As I suggested on Rosh Hashanah, it's equally important to talk about pressing our souls gently so that we might find more light in our lives. But the topic of death, that scares us. It might worry or even obsess us. Since we're not sure we know exactly what happens when we die, the uncertainty makes us afraid. We as humans, by and large, don't really like what we don't or can't understand. But we should talk about death, about our experiences, our fears, our doubts. We shouldn't be obsessed by it, but we should talk about it. Here's why. For one thing, when we don't talk about death as a society, that topic gets pushed aside. And then no attention is paid to what might well be the most important experience in our lives that has the ability to define how we live. Secondly, when we don't speak about the deaths we've experienced in our lives, when we don't process those experiences and feel whatever feelings they raise in us, we can be continually traumatized by them. The pain and loss we never fully allowed ourselves to grieve can ooze or explode out into other moments of our lives, causing harm and renewed pain, and can make us re-experience the pain all over again. And lastly, if we are facing the death of a loved one, and we haven't asked them about how they feel, about what they want to have happen when they die, we can be left holding enormous emotional baggage and big decisions that we're going to need to make whether or not we've asked them what they want. I know that in our sanctuary right now and watching online, our friends whose loved ones have died since last Yom Kippur, I can hear the sniffles. Likely there are very few of us who have not dealt with death, the death of our dear ones at some point in our lives. I recognize that this is a sensitive subject and one that might trigger feelings for you. Our clergy team and our social worker, Rabbi Miriam Hersher, are here for you always. If you want or need to process your feelings, you don't have to do so alone. In speaking about this topic, I'm aware that it can be a difficult one, but that's part of what it means to be a real community. To be able to talk about the things we have in common and not just the easy things. How we deal with death, our attitudes, our practices, and how we deal with it as a congregation, these are a reflection in many ways of our approach to life. Moreover, both the inevitability and the uncertainty of death are facts that we cannot escape. We are, as Todd May says, ultimately creatures who are aware that there is an end that awaits us. And that awareness structures the way we go about our lives, even, perhaps especially, when we act as though we are never going to die. I want to ask you 5 questions. Questions that might feel as hard or even harder than who shall live and who shall die. For this moment, the questions are rhetorical in that I'm not asking you to answer them out loud right this second. But I am asking you to think about them seriously, and I am asking you to begin to answer them in your head. And then, even after this long day together, even though you came early, I'm going to send you home with some homework that I'm glad to help you with. So here we go. Number 1. What are you most proud of accomplishing in your life? And how would you like others to speak about you when you've died? Number 2. Have you talked with those you love about how you feel about death, about what you wonder, what you doubt, what you fear? Number 3. As death approaches for you, may it be many years from now. What are your wishes that you would like your loved ones and friends and medical professionals to honor? Number 4. Have you written not just a will outlining how your physical assets are to be dispersed, but an ethical will that outlines the values and advice you want your loved ones to hold on to and pass on to others when you die? And number 5. What are your wishes for when you die? And have you communicated those wishes to your friends and loved ones? Have you made arrangements with a funeral home so that your loved ones won't need to both guess what you'd want and then scramble to make plans that you could have made? My friends, why am I asking you these questions? Because they're important. Because you're entitled to answer them. Because these answers, the answers to these questions, will teach something to those you love about how you ideally want to live and how you ideally want to die. And because I've met too many families who didn't have these important and difficult conversations with their loved ones, and then, when it was too late to ask, nobody knew what their loved one would have wanted. They left too many words unspoken, and now they live with regrets. I've been with too many families who avoided these questions because they felt scary and superstitious. But then the family ended up divided and upset with one another as they struggled to decide what to do and what their loved ones would have wanted. If you think about these questions, hard though they might be, and then answer them, and then tell your nearest and dearest exactly what you want, then, when the time comes, may it be many years from now, everyone will know what your wishes for the future were. There will be no guessing, and I promise there will be more comfort. So grateful that I'll have the opportunity to be in conversation right here at 3:30 this afternoon with Shari Tefillah member Stephanie Gary, who is the Executive Vice President for Communal Partnerships at Plaza Community Chapel, as we talk publicly about these sensitive matters. I'm also immensely grateful that fellow congregants Ben Hakim, Jennifer Seidman, and Cliff Schneider will be sharing their experiences with the recent deaths of their loved ones during the afternoon service at 4:30 today. I hope you'll join us all the way through. I'm not asking you these questions because I'm asking you these questions because whether or not we talk about them, my friends, we will live and we will die. And the ultimate question for us on Yom Kippur every year is, what kind of legacy will we leave for those who come after us? We have a choice today. To leave a clearly communicated legacy that we shared while we lived, or a legacy that is murky because we chose not to talk about things that seem scary. Because we thought, for reasons my heart completely understands, that if we didn't talk about them, they wouldn't happen. Rabbi Sharon Brous teaches that, quote, we need to have these conversations not only so that our families know our wishes. It's always too early to have the conversation, she says, until it's too late. But also because somehow talking about dying reminds us that we are still living. As someone who lost a loved one so suddenly, I speak from experience when I say, please don't wait. Please don't avoid saying all the things you need to say. I can promise you that you will never regret saying those things, answering these questions. But you might well, or your loved ones might well, regret having avoided talking about these things. I know that for many of us, these topics feel hard and scary. Maybe. But as Mr. Rogers, about whom we heard from Rabbi Reuben last night, one of my most important rabbis, said, what is mentionable is manageable. What is mentionable is manageable. So here's where the homework comes in. Have these conversations. Write your answers down. Put the answers in a safe place where your loved ones know where to find them. Or better yet, make copies of your answers and give them to your loved ones. And even better, talk them through with your loved ones. In the coming weeks and months, we're going to provide forums for all of us to become more knowledgeable about Jewish traditions around death, dying, and burial, which are some of the most meaningful and powerful rituals we have. We're going to invite you to explore with us Jewish views on what happens when we die. We're going to make the space for conversations that would help us be more present when we or someone we love suffers a loss or approaches death, so that we can be more supportive friends and family members and community members as we accompany one another through the stages of grief and loss. How do I show up for someone I love? What should I say when there are no words? What shouldn't I say? And with the help of volunteers from the congregation, we're going to create opportunities for us all to get clear on critically important end-of-life decisions. And we're going to endeavor to create a Chevra Kadisha, a group of congregants who will learn to tend to the bodies of our loved ones who have died, a sacred act. If you're interested in being a part of any of these efforts, please email me after Yontif. Who shall live and who shall die, our liturgy asks. The answer is at once more simple and more intense than I ever thought it could be. Who shall live and who shall die? I will. We will. And because we know that we will someday die, we have a greater awareness, a greater invitation to choose how we will live. Let's choose to live with as few regrets as possible, with as few words as possible left unspoken. Let's choose to live lives that we would be proud for our family and friends to speak about at our funeral. Let's choose to have the hard conversations so that our loved ones fully understand what we live for, what we most value. And so that when the time comes for us to die, they will know what we were about and what mattered most to us. I miss my dad every single day. When the White Sox win, I want to call him and celebrate. When they blow a big lead, which they've done a lot this season, I want to call him and commiserate. I would do anything to have him back, to have him sitting right here next to my amazing mom. I know I can't have that. But I know what I do have every single day. I have the knowledge I learned from him as a husband, father, and friend. I so admire the way he lived his life without regrets, without holding back what he thought and felt and dreamed about, even though none of us could have known how few years he'd have. Of all the many gifts he left to my mom, to my brother, to our families, and me, is the way he lived his one wild and precious life. As he lived, we knew what he valued. And when he died, all too soon, we knew through oceans of tears what he wanted too. On this day of vows, I vow that my children will know the same about me. Will you join me in this vow? Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed for blessing in the book of lives. Well lived.